Hello. Can people see us right
Hello.
now?
No, they can see the acknowledgement.
Okay.
Should I take the? I'm taking the acknowledgement.
Okay. Hi. Hi, everyone. We have Gnome, August in the other room. He'll come to visit. I'm Marisa. This is Amelia, and we're joined today by Talara. Acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. You know, we'll leave the state ones out, but yeah, just a bit about our different experiences and things that we notice, things we read from other arts workers, you know, in a very like general sense, talking about this picture, this small to medium landscape. So, Talara, would you like to introduce yourself and how, you know, in a way that just like feels right to you and in a way that relates to the topic today?
Yeah, sure.
Power in the arts org.
Sure. Before I introduce myself though, I would also like to acknowledge that we're meeting on Yagara and Turrbal land, and I would like to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded and this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. My name's Talara Gray. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an artist and arts worker based in Anjin. And I've been working in, small arts orgs for the last 10 years since graduating art school. Mostly in, that's a kind for not-for-profit community organisations, extractive industries. So I did that for a few years. And I guess off the back of that, and with my art training, kind of got into working with the arts community. Yeah,
Fabulous. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
So I guess like opening it to the floor, what has your experience kind of been in small to medium arts organisations, and how do you see Power kind of working in them?
I feel like that's a massive question.
It is a massive question. Maybe we can start on like the structure. Like what's the structure of an arts org?
Here's the deep end.
I know.
Yeah.
It's like we just like start somewhere and kind of like infiltrate all areas slowly, and like that would kind of work.
Well, they're fundamentally a pyramid structure. Like the structure of small and medium arts orgs don't vary that much from corporate structures, which I think in like an industry where we're supposed to be so radical and progressive and like on the cusp of things and focused on community and individuals, we still very much follow a corporate structure. So like you have a director at the top, and then you have like assistant directors or heads of departments, and then you have like project managers, and then you have the doing people as the base of the pyramid. It's exactly the org structure of most companies.
Yeah, very hierarchical.
Yeah. Oh, and then
very kind of rigidly hierarchical.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like the top level, or Noam mentioned like a board.
Yeah.
The board of an organisation. Which are elusive and strange mechanisms, which I sometimes understand and sometimes don't understand. I'm not sure about you guys, but and then you have like CEO or EO or director, or often one person who is kind of at the top overseeing like all operational programming and administrative duties of the org, as well as trying to manage, or the CEO or EO in small organizations, is that they kind of need to know all of the goings on of an org, in order to be able to, because they're often, even like direct line managers, of at least like a few staff. But I think the thing that's interesting is they have to know what everyone is doing, but that is like humanly impossible.
Right.
And I think that's an interesting thing maybe to bring up about that role.
Yeah. So I've definitely seen structures before where they like divide the operations from the creative direction and have like two people at the top sometimes, which is also interesting. I'm wondering about like, if that's like effective, and if that sort of helps to reduce like the load on all that one whole person. And I wonder how it is for an artistic director to be managing both like the operational side and the creative side, and being like the ideas person and also being the face of the org as well.
And managing like all of the relationships with like stakeholders, funding bodies.
And I also think like where dynamic structure connections and all of that. Say an in-house legal team and somebody from that team would be on the board of a company. The arts, we just have volunteers doing that pretty important work. So you're always asking quite a lot of those individuals, and they have a lot of responsibility as well. So
as soon as you read like the insurance,
you're
liable for a lot.
Liable.
Yeah, it's kind of insane. And it's kind of interesting to think about that, because I know that I would love to see more artists on boards, Like, instead of just having people from from corporate sort of areas, or people who don't know much about the
Who
arts,
have like a
or
tangential interest in the arts,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
whose lived experience is not.
okay, if they're going to have to do that volunteer, and if they're going to have to take on like so much liability, it's a bit scary.
I'm really taking on that professional position in a volunteer capacity.
I think it's really important. Like, the volunteer thing, I think is fine, because then I'm not doing it for financial gain. I'm doing it because I want to see a better change in the world, and that's really why, I've been like offered other jobs in the arts, and I've like, I feel like I enjoy my say as a member of a board more than being a person that does the work. Which, to climb the board, I need to
But there's a
change over mind.
sorry.
I don't know.
Fixing everything.
Before we started formally live streaming this chat, I was saying how like freeing it is to like not be the one responsible for the tech, because
Oh my
usually
gosh.
in my roles that I've had, like I've been the one like on the Zoom, like looking after like all the participants, making sure everything was good, and like responding to questions, and it's like such a big and daunting role. So I'm very grateful.
Thank you
Yeah.
for doing all the tech.
It's stressful.
Yeah, I know, it's so stressful.
You handled that so well. Dear, very calm.
It's so stressful. Anyway,
What were we saying? What were we talking about?
We're talking about boards.
Yeah.
Boards.
Yeah.
I guess like I often wonder like why we don't have more artist cooperatives, and why we're so wedded to this like structure of the pyramid with the board on top, the non-profit structure. Like, wouldn't it be yeah, we don't really have much of a like cooperative culture in Australia. I think it's a bit more in the US.
See, I remember when I started in RE, we looked at everyone else around us and we're like, who are the other REs? How do we start an RE based off of that? And so the only other REs that existed were like these organisational structures that were like incorporated. They had like a board, they had like a president, a secretary, and a treasurer, and they had like all the different things. And so that's the way that we thought things should have been.
Yeah.
And that's the way I thought things would need it to
Yeah.
be. Because I'm like, oh, that's how things function. That's
it's
how
like
things
status
prosper.
quo stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then bumping into people like Sarah Polgrain, who's just like, no, and like kind of anti-hierarchical, and things just gonna happen when they happen. Things will just be good when they're good, and like that's like a very freeing mentality. And ever since that, like that's the way that Wreckers, the downstairs space. So I mentioned the name. That's the way that the Wreckers downstairs space runs. Is anti-hierarchical. Well, it's not anti-hierarchical. It's just there's no hierarchy. It's just people pick up where they can pick up. So sometimes I'm there painting walls. Other times it's Hen. Sometimes it's Pian. We're all like chop and change. Sometimes I do social media. Sometimes Pian does social media. Like no one has a defined role, and I think if we can show that those spaces are like successful and people can emulate them, then we can beat that kind of like pyramid where people are like trying to get power because they're like a president of some arts organization, and then that hopefully that then I don't know if that will ever filter into like actual proper funded art orgs, because funding models require them to be like an incorporated association with the pyramid. So how do you think we can break that pyramid?
Yeah, especially on that like larger scale, like the medium size orgs in the small to medium range.
I guess the reason we have the pyramid is because it works very well when it does work. Like it's the tried tested formula, and it's the easy go-to. And there's also, like you mentioned, when an org gets big enough, we do need somebody that has a level of accountability. Like you need somebody at the top of the pyramid who answers to everything the organisation does, which is a huge amount to take on. But like I also think it's worth examining, is it working? Because inherently having a pyramid structure, there's a funneling thing that happens. Like once you've worked in the arts for long enough, especially once like your position on the pyramid is tied to your like ability to access basics of life in the form of a salary. Like you have to eventually start to climb up the pyramid if you want to do things in life, like house yourself or have a family, or like because the base level doesn't normally earn enough to support those sorts of endeavors.
I feel like I just want to like go back, Noam, to what you just said first about like hierarchical structures. Like ultimately, like someone is accountable for the org, and like what did you say? Tried tested? Is that what you said? Tried and tested. Yeah. And I think like as a worker, when it works really well, I think it feels really good. Like when you're like supported and you know like what your job is, you can like succeed in your job, like when it works well, it works really well. But like what I would say is like, what is the percentage of it working well? Like
maybe we're biased because we're Beaver, but we hear a lot. We hear a lot of things about especially people on the lower and middle strata on the structure, like not having a good time. It is it's set up quite extractively in terms of you know the labor of all the people in the pyramid. It's all going like that upwards, so like it is kind of, I see the structure as being kind of fundamentally exploitative actually.
That's an interesting thing because like at the very top you are responsible and have all the accountability, but you also get all the credit of like what you were saying about it being extractive. Like you're able to design a program and delegate how that program is delivered and see like your vision come to fruition. When like, you know, you're, especially in the arts, you're always employing incredibly well educated, very experienced people. Like most of us have like undergrad, postgrad, PhD, and we're like still entry level positions, and you're often like assigned a project or a job that might not align to your own personal values, and we're very aware of that, I think, because of how much we've engaged in our work. That was jumbled.
No. I also think, because I kind of feel like we're like talking a little bit about like the nature of like the administrators and program workers and the people who are kind of like on the ground as like the face of the organization, doing whatever. And I think it's worth talking about the nature of those people sometimes, because I think you touched on something really important, in that like typically well educated, like PhD, postgrad. But I also think because we are arts workers and we're in the arts, I think I'm speaking very generally, and maybe I should just speak for myself actually, but I think we all like really deeply value like relationships and connections, and all of the things that art practices talk about, and the value of sensitivity and the value of self-expression and all of that kind of stuff. And I think because of that makes our labour, I think we work way harder than we sometimes should or need to for what we're being paid for. And that, I don't know if that's also your experience or reflection, but a generalization of the kind of people that are in those roles sometimes, I think.
I also just think about like looking at a CEO artistic director salary versus like a programming person's salary, and just, you know, say the one at the top is like 3 times the salary of the person on the bottom. Like, is the CEO or artistic director actually working 3 times as hard as the person on the bottom?
It's just different
and
kind
are
of
they
work.
3 times cleverer? It's like, no, the people on the bottom in the arts, they all have like PhDs and stuff, like they've all got degrees, you know, so I don't know, like maybe there's an experience aspect or other things to it, but it's like the gap is too big in my personal opinion. Like I don't think anyone is really like 3 times cleverer than anyone else, or 3 times more, you know, like whatever that gap is. Yeah.
It's interesting.
What do you think would incentivize people to take on like a director role if it wasn't a salary? Because there's a lot of
Yeah.
accountability that comes with that.
Yeah.
I would also argue there's a lot of accountability when you're the one on the ground working
Yeah.
with communities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, because especially if you're
Like,
the one in the
you're okay.
relationship with the artists, like directly,
Yeah.
and then I think we spoke the other day about like what happens if like someone makes a decision above you that you don't agree with, like, or they cut a program, or they're like sudden change, and then you have to like let down an artist directly, but you're the one having to do that
Yeah.
face to face,
Yeah.
and you're the one feeling really bad about it. Yeah.
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 I think that's a really hard experience to go through, but I think it happens often. And I don't think it happens in like huge ways super often, but I think it happens in little ways. Like I think that I'm just thinking about now about like it being like non-hierarchical and what would happen if everyone, there's like equal spread of like control and accountability and transparency between everyone, instead of it just being kind of one person's job to have to communicate out the wishes of lots of little nodes.
Yeah,
Sorry.
totally.
It's like I lost my point there a little bit. Yeah.
Well, I think like I also wonder how much accountability actually happens for artistic directors and CEOs. Like, just say like a board selects somebody and then that person ends up just like really not being right for whatever reasons, or I don't know, they get is messed up somehow, like something happens and like what normally happens when an artistic director doesn't do their job properly, they actually normally just either like stick around far too long and eventually get another job, or I don't know, the kind of just the board maybe does like an artful quiet exit of them or something. Like it's like maybe because they don't want to be embarrassed because they were the ones who ultimately selected that person, or I don't know what it is, but I don't know what kind of accountability I really see
And then
when
it's
artistic directors don't do their job.
It's a career path. Once you're an artistic director of something, your next gig is going to be being the artistic director of something.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I suppose how that works is just there's lots of different types of organisations and you find a benefit, like dating.
Yeah.
And
It's
I
difficult,
really
isn't
like
it?
Talara's idea of what if everyone was just paid like similarly, and they all just had like their role that they had to do,
And then
that sounds really, really sweet and really nice.
I know. Utopian.
Yeah.
Unrealistic. No.
Yeah. Because like they're different roles in the same organisation. Like why are we valuing one over the other?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't like
It's like you could have one person whose role was to like ensure that everyone else was like following the strat plan or strategic artistic direction or something.
Yeah.
Like they don't need to be like the top of the power structure. That could just be like one role in the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like being that go-between person or being like the
Yeah. And it's like someone's job to raise money, and it's someone else's job to like roll out programs, and it's someone else's job to like do the communications, and it's someone else's job, and like the org doesn't work when one of those things is missing. Like it just like doesn't.
Yeah.
It's like Jenga. You remove one of them, the thing starts
like,
to like falter, and you're like, oh, can I pull out another one?
I know.
And then.
But this is the thing: the tower rarely crashes because every other block just like scrambles and burns out to make sure that like it does not fall.
Yeah. That's such a good analogy.
Yeah. It's just like
Every other block's holding on
Suppose.
as strong as it can so the thing doesn't tumble.
Well, because it is almost like when that happens and you're employed on those lower rungs, like it puts you in a really awkward position. It's like, do I not hold it together and like deal with the consequences of that for me personally, because like you're then again like you're the one letting people down, you're the one, you know, or do I burn myself out and fill the hole? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's
What do you do?
part of the thing is arts orgs are actually like that circle where we all have like an integral role, but it's just not compensated that way.
Yeah.
You know, we place certain powers in like a singular instance, and they control everything else. They control the direction, and everyone should have equal say, I reckon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think board and then like workers should also like they should have like say. Like I think a board shouldn't force workers to do a project that they don't want to do.
Yeah.
Totally.
I think when the board,
Totally.
I think whenever they're deciding programming or whatever, they should be talking to the workers and like, well, this is what we're gonna do. This is how it's gonna be achieved, and then the worker can go, actually, that doesn't sound good. Like
Yeah.
that's actually not gonna work.
And I can totally imagine, like, if you're from, like, a marginalised community or identity or something, and you're on those, like, lower echelons and, you know, you've been hired to do a certain role and you want to bring all your, like, cultural competence to it and your, like,
Yeah.
cultural labour to it, and then, like, you're forced into a position where someone above you is doing something that puts you in a really awkward position, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I can imagine that's really gut-wrenching,
Yeah.
and difficult, and I'm sure it's common as hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
Is it-
stressful experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I can imagine, like, a lot of the times you're like, why am I here? With my skills and, like, my, like, things that I'm, like, really good and passionate about. I'm, like, spending it here and no one's listening to me, or no one wants to do the things that I think that need to happen. Or they're not listening to my advice when they should actually be listening to my advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, yeah, like we're touching on something really important, and I think that is like often the people that are kind of like rolling out the programs, or like doing the work, or like making events happen, or making exhibitions happen, or like actually getting things on the wall, making things happen,
Making everything happen.
making everything happen.
Everything.
Often aren't the ideas people, or the
Yeah.
people that are conceiving exhibitions, conceiving programs. I think there is space in the current structure for it to be more collaborative than that, and like I have definitely experienced that at times, and I think it's hard to do in that structure, and I think when like human resources and our own internal resources are low, I think those kind of efforts made out of like goodwill and good heart get dropped off, and it becomes two people just like doing their jobs.
Yeah.
Because I think it is hard, for someone who is typically hire a CEO or a curator or a director to kind of be the one with the ideas, and then other people being the ones actually rolling it out.
Yeah.
Because unless there's like a really good working relationship and open communication and dialogue and safety about like what is possible and what is good, and like time to consider everything and talk through everything, and like we don't have that luxury in capitalism. Like we don't have like weeks to be able to work collaboratively. Like with the KPIs that we have in the arts and the turnover that we do, we don't have that environment to be able to do that work well, I think.
And I think that, like what you were saying about not having that capacity under capitalism and like the kind of hierarchical structure that we've adopted, there is a weird, like what you were saying about the safety and open communication. When you're employed to do a job, there is still this weird dynamic of power between the person who has employed you, asking you to do something, and then the power you have to push back on that, because it is tied to your ability to live. So that like inherently creates a imbalance of power.
It's inherently coercive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, when your ability to live is tied to that. Yeah.
But I'm
Awful.
also incredibly optimistic because I think the arts is the best testing ground
Mm-hmm.
for a non-hierarchical, more collaborative structure, because like we were saying earlier, your core workers are highly motivated, highly caring, highly
Yeah.
engaged and educated in the work they're doing. So there is so much goodwill there that
Yeah.
like it doesn't work the way other companies do. You could foster those relationships and that sharing.
Mm.
And I'm gonna go get my dog. He's not playing
Yeah.
ball.
Oh, yes.
He's barking.
Poor August.
Oh, poor August. Yeah, definitely.
It just doesn't work when, or I feel like it doesn't work when, because relying on like someone's goodwill and good intentions to have the correct practice falls through
Yeah.
when there's stresses or,
Yeah.
the lack of resources.
Yeah,
Internal
and it needs
resources.
like constant self-reflection as well.
Yeah.
It needs to be like literally a part of your practice. Like,
Yeah.
like in social work, we're taught about like power and how we're always exercising power, and we need to have like a really good critical lens around our practice constantly, and we're encouraged to be really self-reflective about it. But I really don't think that happens in the corporate structures. Like, I haven't ever really seen like a leadership talk or I've never encountered like a person in leadership who kind of puts it in those same like social justice terms around like, I want to have a really anti-oppressive like leadership practice. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, maybe like some people do have that, but they use a bit of different terminology or something, but it's definitely not quite done in the same way.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
feel like it's kind of coming to like a boiling point or a pressure point because of the topics that we're like addressing and talking about in exhibitions and in
Yeah.
programming and in the arts, and we're making exhibitions about these things and we're trying to talk about these things, and it's like kind of getting really tight and tense because like we're trying to do this thing but like
Yeah.
but we
Yeah.
can't,
Yeah, yeah.
or like not with
You know, that's,
integrity,
like,
or I don't know.
So interesting. Like, there's this term in social work called like the gap between your theory and your practice, and I think about like how arts organizations have such a big gap between their theory and practice, because it's like they're programming all this great social justice, anti-oppressive like stuff, but then their like literal structure is still like fundamentally whack, basically.
Yeah.
And you know, even like there's critiques out there around like how organizations are increasingly programming institutional critique by artists, but then like nothing systemically changes. So in a way, like the arts org gets to look more progressive and self-aware and like, oh, we're so open to critique, like look at us, we're so groovy, but it's like you literally haven't changed your like exploitative hiring structure at all. Yeah.
Well, nothing really changes.
Yeah, nothing really changes.
Yeah. Or if it does, it happens very, very slowly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it only changes from like changing like the institution from the inside slowly by convincing the people that are in it that there's a better
I would
way
love
to
some
do it.
like ragtag CEO artistic director who goes like full communist on an arts organization.
Yeah.
Like, you know. I mean, I wonder if like the board would support them in that endeavor, or if the board would be like, no.
Yeah.
What
Kind
will
of
we
interesting.
do?
I feel like there's a TV series by like Shonda Rhimes in this, like some kind of like.
That's an interesting point though, because that's kind of a power dynamic that happens. Like an organization can slowly shape their board, and then the board can slowly shape the organization. So it would actually be a very long-term project to try and achieve that, because you'd have to get a board spicy enough to be on board for the communist director, and then you'd have to find that director, and like I don't know, I feel like a lot of us buy into the fact that we could change it if we play the game for long enough. Like if we come into an organization with those ideals and make change very slowly, then you could influence the organisation and in turn make it better for you and for artists that you work with. But then you kind of just get sucked into how the organisation is working. It's such a machine.
Yeah, and it's like I think it's kind of built that way. It's like it's kind of built to tire you out, so you don't have time to like you don't have time to do all that like slow work around the bigger picture. Yeah, you're just stuck in the like, what needs to happen tomorrow? What needs to happen this week? You know.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, it's no secret that like the turnover in arts orgs is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And that it's not uncommon for like entire organisations to turn over their whole staff in any given year.
Yeah.
Or at the very least every few years.
Which is really
like,
if any board members are watching right now and that's happening, like that means there's a problem.
Yeah,
it probably means you need to look at your artistic director and ask what's going on, you know, interpersonally or work-wise, workload-wise. Yeah, something's happening.
Just talk directly to the base of the organisation. Like, I've worked in a lot of small orgs and the board's so secretive. Like, very rarely do you get to have frank conversations, or like they even come into the organisation and check in with the staff.
Yeah, they should be checking in with the staff all the time. I feel like that's part of their job, to be checking the health of the org. Like,
You're making me feel like a really good board member right now.
Yeah.
Do you check in?
You know all your stuff.
I go into the space all the time.
Yeah.
Multiple times.
Yeah.
Always check in. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, certainly like the slightly larger orgs, I haven't seen that happen or heard it happen.
But again, it's also volunteer roles, and these are normally like with the bigger orgs, you need board members who are of a certain level of professionalism that they normally have like heckin' careers on the side.
Yeah, they've got a full
and
career.
Capacity.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
Even if they saw an issue, like what is their capacity to actually address it? Like I would say usually not great maybe. But but I'm sure I've definitely experienced people that on boards that make you feel like you're important and seen and heard. Like that definitely also exists. But I think it's just like the fundamentals of being a human. Like we're finite creatures, we have finite time, finite resources, and like we're all spread so thin, and that's like not uniquely an arts thing. That's like
I think it's a capitalism thing.
Yeah. I know, everything.
It's a life thing.
It's a life
Capitalism
thing.
It doesn't have to be our life thing, you know? It doesn't have to be. It's just because everything's upside down.
But for capitalism, what else?
Yeah. So I guess I wanted to bring up like how to work in these like hierarchical systems and the power dynamics that come with them. It's really hard. But I think there are like some key ways that sometimes the lens that we're coming in with almost like prevents us from doing more. Like we carry like certain assumptions, certain conditioning, certain lenses around these things that can, the word's not bootstrap us, was it like kneecap us or something? Like it can like stop you from
stunt us?
Stunt us, so when I'm like working with students in social work who are working in similarly like really like highly managerial environments and increasingly managerial environments, increasingly neoliberal environments, and having to deal with all the same shit around like KPIs and managers who don't know how to use power very well and do so badly, have various discourses at play around like who's deserving of support and who's not, and problematic stuff, whatever they're encountering. But often like you'll go in with a certain lens, and some of the common ones are like, oh well, I'm just someone at the bottom bottom of the ladder, so like I'm not important here, so I just like can't say anything, you know. Is like this very kind of rigid sort of mentality, which, you know, I would never say to someone like go mess up your job because it's your way to survive, but sometimes just those like assumptions and maybe just some like black and white thinking about it, like what do I think is going to happen if I like speak up, or if I try this new thing, and like, yeah, assuming that it's always going to be really bad, like no matter how you do it, or yeah, maybe neglecting the fact that there's some room for artful use of power, you know, that maybe is like less risky but still doing something. Assumptions around I'm not valuable here, whereas actually, as you said, like if people all just like stop doing their jobs, the arts orgs get effed, you know.
Can you
like,
give an example from your social work, like when somebody made an assumption and challenged an assumption?
I'm trying to think of a juicy one. I mean, like, I'm working with like students who are on placement, and they all say when they come to class, like, oh, I just felt powerless because I was a student. I'm not a real social worker yet. That's a common one. I'm not a real social worker. And it's like, oh, you had this like identity that you kind of like almost put on yourself, or you absorbed it, and then you thought about yourself differently, which like made you kind of unable to see that you do actually have like a important voice. And there are certain like things about being a student that you can be artful about, like being a new person and being a student, you can like ask all kinds of curious questions. Like, oh, I'm just like wondering like why you do things this way, you know, instead of like a direct challenge, which is almost like you're kind of subverting the power because you're using your like status on the bottom of the rung to just like bring something into the light a bit.
Yeah.
You know,
I like
so
that
there are like
example.
ways to
Yeah.
like be kind of groovy about it.
I like that example because I think what you said about labeling, that actually happens a lot in the arts community. Like, it becomes such a big deal whether or not you label yourself as an artist or a practicing artist, or like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm not really an artist, I just like do community projects and that's not real art, or like I'm just an arts worker, like I'm not like an important part of the organisation. But yeah, we can all kind of like curiously prod because organisations are made out of their communities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think another big assumption is like it's all on me. It's all on me. I'm on
Totally.
my own. You know, we're kind of conditioned under capitalism to think in that individualistic way.
Yeah. I remember, it's funny, everything that you're talking about, I've definitely experienced in myself a lot of the time. And yeah, I remember my dad pulling me up once and telling me that, I think I got this right, that I wasn't indispensable. That I wasn't dispensable. I wasn't indispensable.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, meaning like I'm only a human. I'm not bigger than human. There are other humans that can also do the thing that I'm doing. Like, it's not all on you.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you're made to feel that and think that sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. I'm the only dude. I'm the only one that understands. That was happening a lot in my community org. People getting really burnt out because they thought
No one else could.
no one else is gonna get
do
it.
it,
Yeah, you know. I mean, like sometimes it can turn into like a little bit of a martyr sort of complex, you know, like in a funny way. Like no one gets it like me, and I'm working so hard, and then you can use that to rationalize your terrible treatment of other people. But but it is true. Like,
I think that's a small way we're trying to hold on to our power by believing those narratives about ourselves, that like if I didn't continue doing this work then it wouldn't get done in this way, and so yeah, I think like maybe I perceive that as feeling powerless, to just accept the fact that I'm a human and there's humans who could do this. Yeah. But, like, it also subverts the power dynamic. Like, I don't know, do you feel a power in accepting that humanness about yourself? Like,
I think I'm still practicing it. But yeah, definitely.
I think it's like you're not indispensable, but you are valuable, and too often
Yes.
orgs treat you like you're disposable. It's like, oh, let's just like, we'll just hire another eager arts graduate. You
Yeah.
know?
And it's so weird to feel like you're dispensable, but at the same time, only you can do your job. Like, what?
Yeah. Crazy making.
Confusing.
Yeah.
So confusing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I guess, like, I think as kind of millennially people, we're a bit conditioned to, like, people please a lot.
Yeah.
I think,
absolutely.
and maybe also, like, as women or AFAB people as well, like, but I really think there's something about millennial conditioning, which is like we've been taught implicitly that we're disposable and that we have to like keep working if we're gonna like make it through this market of like this terrible job market that's gonna like eat us alive, and like only a few people make it at the top. And yeah, like, so we're really conditioned to not put our own needs
Yeah.
somewhere important.
Yeah.
Not put importance on our own needs. So yeah,
Which
are
is-
there ways that you're sort of kneecapping yourself from using your own power? Yeah, preventing
Yeah.
yourself from exercising power.
Yeah. Because that's one of the ways that we don't take power when we have it sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is by not advocating for like often the high level of like knowledge that we have and expertise that we have. And it's all there. Yeah.
Yeah, and like conflict is really scary. Like sticking up for yourself is really hard and scary, and like sometimes you just like feel like it's impossible, like even on a personal level. Like I've had, like, I'm thinking of like one particular friendship that broke down, and I knew intellectually I should be able to like talk about it. I should be able to like just go have a conversation with this person. It's going to be okay. But it felt impossible. Like it felt impossible. I had to go to therapy, and now I think if it happened again now, it wouldn't feel impossible. But like, yeah, various reasons. I think maybe around like being neurodivergent and not knowing for so long, and like just implicitly sort of like never really like putting my own needs first in that way without even realizing that I was doing that has created some stuff. But yeah, just to say that these things are really possible. Like it's possible,
Yeah.
to do.
it was a good, curious thought pattern that you guys led me down, where it was like, what would actually happen if you push back? If like you feel like a decision is being made by an ideas person and you don't get a say in
Yes.
Ideas.
Sorry there.
Ideas, people, problems.
Ideas, people, problems.
What if you did like pitch your own idea, or what if you did push back and say like, I think this is a better way of executing that? Like,
Yeah.
what would happen?
Or
could
I
go wrong?
can't do overtime on this day. Or like,
Yeah.
you're underpaying me for all the hours I'm doing, or whatever it is.
Because often they're disaster narratives you're feeding yourself
Yes.
of like,
Yes.
if I pushed back, then they won't ask me to do things in the future, and then like I'll slowly become a less integral organization, and then I'm not as valuable, and then it's like,
Or they
very
just won't
spiral-
like me. They won't like me.
Yeah.
It's real spiral thoughts, and none of it's like an actual true narrative. Like,
Yeah,
Totally.
definitely. Yeah, because I've never seen anyone like be fired for like pushing back, but
No.
I do wonder if like, you know that term like quiet firing, if someone like quiet fires you by just sort of freezing you out of stuff, and you know that can happen,
But
I'm sure,
wouldn't-
but
Yeah. Yes.
yeah. But I
No,
mean,
mine-
these things are risks. Like, it's not like your disaster narratives are like completely made up. They're never like totally. It's never like there's nothing to them, but maybe they're driven by like other negative experiences, or the way you were brought up, or living under capitalism, or like whatever. Maybe that's sort of impacting on your decision making.
Yeah. And often, like, I would argue, like, in reflecting about my own practice as an arts worker and actually just like experience in life, like, one would argue that like the cost of like not advocating for yourself and being uncomfortable and having risky conversations, which could get you actually a good outcome, like that's a chance, or there is also a chance that you could have a more negative outcome anyway, but like if you do that, there could be a positive outcome. But what you do by not having the hard conversations and not pushing back is you just burn out and have to quit anyway.
Yeah.
Like, that's the reality of it.
That's so true. Yeah.
And like, I think like way harder, way more courageous, way more difficult to like try and advocate for yourself and do the hard things with the possibility of having a good outcome.
Yeah.
Like, worst case is it's a bad outcome, but like you had a bad outcome anyway when you like were self-imploding and not coping and like burning out and like doing all this stuff, and then had to leave and go into a random job for 3 months because you're like, what is my life? I can't do this.
I do have a good experience under my belt from challenging somebody, but I was in, like, I recognized I was in a powerful position because I was being like interviewed for the job, but I didn't need the job. And so just saying to someone like, like, what are you going to do to look after the mental health of your employees while I'm here? And kind of saying like, maybe you don't have the best rep, you know? And I was like, my heart was beating so fast. So I was on the phone. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm saying this right now. It was like terrifying. But the response was really good, and I was treated with respect the whole time, which I know had not been the case for the people working there before. So I don't know, maybe it's not all down to that one phone call, but it is at least like, I do have an example of it going well, basically.
And when people do push back, it's better outcomes for everyone. Like, by you raising that issue that an organisation like wasn't really caring for the mental health or workload of their employees, like, your pushing back makes the people higher up reanalyze if that is a thing, because nobody's like said it to them before.
Yeah. Your voice is really powerful.
It is.
It's actually really powerful, and everybody has one. You know, no matter what position you're in, you have a voice, and that's a source of power. Like, you do have a lot of ability to affect your surroundings and the people around you.
But that is
But we're so conditioned to not use it.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
You were in the unique position, like you said, where you didn't need the job.
Yes.
So you had.
It was kind of like, what's the worst that can happen here, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting that like some people don't even kind of recognize that. Like, I know I had a student who had already gotten another job at another org, but still just sort of went like, if I like tell people like how bad it was in my current place, like it's just gonna mess it all up and it won't be received anyway, and the whole place is toxic. They kind of went no, and like moved on. And it's like, you were in a total power position right now. Like, you had another job, you could have totally sent an email to the right person, or you know, whatever it was going to be.
Is that like a reputational issue though? Like, to drop the hand grenades on the way out? Like,
Boof, 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 boof.
Yeah, you got to be careful about it. Yeah.
But I also think it would be cool to have a reputation as a disruptor that, like, hopefully makes organizations a bit better as you leave them.
Yeah, totally. But I wonder if it's an assumption that it will be disruptive. You know what I mean? Like, I wonder if there's like, oh, if I like say anything or do anything, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem for them. Which in a way is just seeing like, you're seeing yourself and your needs as being like counter to the needs of the organization. So you're framing it as like, if I say something or leave this message or whatever, that's going to be a problem. But it's in the organization's best interest to have happy employees and supported employees too. There's not necessarily, like, if they perceive what you're doing as a problem, that's kind of their perception of it. You're not being the problem.
I totally make that assumption in my hand grenade metaphor. Like,
I mean, yeah,
you
but
might not be dropping grenades, you might be giving bouquets of flowers
Yeah.
of ideas
Yeah.
of how to flourish.
I
on
am
the way
gracing them with my opinion and experience. Yeah. But like, who does that benefit? Like, who does it benefit to just think, oh, everything I'm going to do is going to be a problem? Like, it benefits the people in power.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in the end, it doesn't really benefit them because they don't have happy employees and they have a high turnover rate, and their organization doesn't have the stability of people who are like fully invested in their roles. Like,
But I wonder if people see there's an issue. I don't think people see that as an issue. I think people accept that as the reality of the consequences of the environment that we're working in. Actually, is the way that I've heard managers talk about it sometimes.
yes, like it's a motivator.
No, not directly, but just like, the fact that like everyone's moving jobs and there's high turnover, and it's just like normalizing that.
Right. Yeah.
I think is more
they
specifically
normalise
what
it.
I was meaning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't always used to be like that. I feel like this is a very recent, like, people used to have careers and stay with organizations for like the life of their work. Gig economy is new, right? It's like
Yeah, it is.
it's not normal to have a new job every year, is it?
No, it's a really neoliberal thing.
Yeah.
Being like really mobile, really well networked, being like the sole, kind of related to that individualistic thing of like you're the sole trader entrepreneur and you're like just being highly responsive and highly mobile and you're like adapting to whatever the world throws at you, and that's seen as being really good. It's like maybe like the system
Exhausting.
should like change for us instead of us all like adapting to the system and just glorifying that all the time. Yeah.
I like the
Exhausting.
non-hierarchical structure of records because I feel like that really lets you lay down roots, like because you've done a little bit of everything and you understand the organisation really well, and your motivating factors aren't like the pressures of the pyramid structure. You're actually there because you want to be there, and I feel like those are the conditions that are needed for you to like stay long term with an organisation,
Yeah.
like to be the person who built it, like, and is feeding it from the roots, like, yeah. And I think like bigger arts organisations that have been around for a very long time, our assumption is the roots come from their reputation, but like I wonder if that foundation is actually there for them, like, yeah, does that make any sense? Like they end up becoming just ideas rather than something that's deep rooted in community.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, like, arts organisations as they function right now are kind of mainly a platform more than anything else, aren't they? They're a platform rather than a deep embedded, responsive, relational thing.
Yeah.
I think like the platforming comes from people only seeing the outputs of the organisation. And talking about the power dynamics of an organisation, we're kind of talking more about the internal skeleton that's providing the platform. But yeah, I really like the idea of making that a practice in itself, like artists who are engaged in institutional critique and want to treat that as a like living artwork of how those orgs could be.
Exist.
Yeah.
It's really, how are we going for time?
We'll be going for an hour.
Ooh.
Yes,
We should
that's
be-
like just a lovely segue into like what does our utopian arts organisation look like?
Yeah.
You know, like what if we didn't have to have the pyramid with the board on top as the default? Yeah, what other sort of structures are there? What other ways of doing things are there?
I think there's something to be said for the relationships that people have, and rather than kind of like dictating to someone, i.e. an artist, that like XYZ has to happen, and you kind of work together to make it happen. Like, could there not be a way where like we really hold value in like the relationships and our inherent nature to create anyway? Like, if we have relationships and we have this want to create, can that not just be kind of like supported and then like it comes out the other way instead of like
like the org is there to like resource what's already going to happen rather than pick who gets to do the thing and like
and how it happens,
you can
and
be
what
on our
timeline it
platform,
happens, and
sure, you can be on our platform, here's the timelines, but like we're here to resource the work that's already going on. I love that.
But how do you manage workloads for the workers that actually have to do the thing?
How do you mean?
They'll probably just do it because they want it and they care about getting the work out there. Is that completely like utopian? Like, how do you get wreckers to open an exhibition on time if everyone's just...
if no one's responsible?
Well, it's because we give the artists, we're like, when do you want to have a show? And they're like, Tuesday at 4:00 in the afternoon. Cool, I might be around. Someone will be around.
So good.
That's how it goes. Like, we let the artist dictate everything. Like, they do their install, they tell us when they want to install, and we're like, okay, well, do you have a key? Okay, no, you don't have a key. Okay, we'll meet you, and we'll be there for like the first 15 minutes and tell you where not to drill. That's it. You know, but like, see, I think the thing is that's manageable. We can do it that way because we know the program. We know the plan. We know that this month is going to be this artist, that month's going to be that artist, because out of the 80 people that have tried to get a show, the 12 people have picked these particular months. And then maybe there's a couple of like one night shows in and out. Which again, they decide. They're like, I really want like the sunlight on this particular month. Okay, cool. You have that particular month. You like that particular day and that particular month where the sunlight will be gorgeous, apparently. You know? But like, that's my main argument for programming, you know, and not like I understand that it is a platform, and art spaces are platforms because they contextualize art practices within a broader ecology. So people go, you know, it's like, imagine if Kim Kardashian liked Beaver or subscribed to Beaver, you know, we would get like a couple thousand extra followers because people are like, oh my god, Kim Kardashian liked Beaver, oh my god, because that's context. And so it's the same thing with art spaces. It is a platform.
I think
could the platform be a part of what the org does rather than the whole thing?
What do you mean?
Like, could it be that you have like your program with the shows, but then everyone is really well resourced to just be doing all of this like relationship work, slow making, like building community, all this kind of stuff like in the background as well. So like the platforming is just like one part of the function of what the org does.
See, for me, I'm imagining a bigger level than that, because for me, Wreckers is like a little thing, and what there actually should be is a bunch of other little things. Right. And then the grander thing is all these ARIs collected or an organisation in your mind.
There's one ARI that's the one that goes between all the other ARIs and like creates this nice like unity between.
Well,
I'm just like using our analogy.
And there's like circles that overlap and move around.
But they contextualize each other.
Yeah.
And then that's how we go, oh, you had a show at Wreckers. Okay, I kind of know of your work based on that because I seen like a post.
Yeah.
And, oh, you had a show at this other ARI. Oh, yeah, I know about that.
So it'd be like a lot more decentralized. It wouldn't be like we have 4 decent-sized art spaces in Brisbane and that's kind of it. It would be like all this like tiny work.
Yeah, tiny work. where people are working on the thing that they actually want to work on. They're serving the art community that they believe that needs to be served, and then it all works. I want to say homogenously, but I don't know if that's the right word, but I want to say it.
Yeah.
You know, it all works in tandem with one another. Where that's my utopia. Is that it's we all create these little art orgs, and we all show our art, and so this one art org shows 12 artists a month, and then this other one shows 12 artists a month, and over that an entire community served. And then anyone can start an ARI. You don't need permission to start an ARI. You can just go, hey, I'm an ARI now. Do you want to start an ARI right now? And
start an ARI.
You know what I mean? And then through that we establish like a stronger bond of community where we support one another and we platform one another. We platform voices, and you know, we're doing the thing we want to do. We're not forced into doing it by some like tyrant who's like, do this thing or else I'm gonna like fire you and like take your living away.
You only have funding for the next 6 months, and you have to expend your whole budget in the next 6 months.
And if you don't hit these KPIs, the funding's going to disappear. You're never going to get funding again.
So what we need is a funding model for like.
That was what I was going to say. Like, how does that get funded? Well, there's a way.
Rolling
like,
funding.
Why doesn't Arts
ARIs.
Queensland just have a funding model for ARIs?
Rolling funding where it's just like you just get this much a year. It's not at risk unless you literally don't do anything or stuff something up really badly.
Sounds like a UB.
It would be like an ARI UBI. Well, because often like the funding doesn't go towards running costs either. It only goes towards like project outcomes. So if you just had the rolling funding to like keep the thing happening, it would be amazing.
And could you imagine the burden that would take off organisations? Like, the amount of work that orgs do to acquire funding and then manage spending the funding and then
Acquit the funding.
I was like acquiring not the right word. And then acquitting the funding. Like, that is so much work.
And then trying to get funding again, and then doing it again, and
it's
then
just like,
it just becomes so focused on getting funding.
And the like disposability in that, where it's like, oh, we only got funding for this program for a year, and now we have to come up with a new program because that's how we get a grant, is only for
it has
new
to be
programs.
new
ideas
new,
instead of like, oh, this thing was working really well, let's just like keep funding that because it's great.
Totally.
It's so interesting how I think there's this rhetoric around like we're giving you all the KPIs to increase your productivity because that's going to give us like more bang for our buck. It means our investment is like the best, we're making the best investment, blah blah blah, getting the most out of it and reducing waste, I guess. But actually the system is like wasteful as hell. Like the waste of the administrative labor, the waste of the disposable art programs that get shown once and then never again, the waste of like people leaving the arts because they're burnt the hell out, like treating like people as if they're disposable, like all this stuff. It's so bloody wasteful. It would like things would like flourish and be so productive if we just like gave everyone rolling funding and let them do their thing. It would change the landscape of this city. It would be like unrecognizable from now. It'd be incredible.
Amelia, with the Reckers example you gave, I feel like Reckers is able to be like that adaptive in their programming because they're programming for a community rather than an audience. It just made me think about like, it's really interesting how community and audience gets conflated in the arts, because once you get, I feel like the reason you're not able to be adaptive in your programming and allow for like slower, more thoughtful work in large organizations is because they're trying to program for an audience instead of a community.
And for numbers.
And then that like starts to feed this massive PR machine of like brand recognition of an organization and it having cultural significance beyond just the arts, as it being a destination, things like that. But like, I think you could take a way more grassroots approach to building that audience. Like your audience could transform to be community, and if your organisation is like properly representative of your community, the audience will come naturally, and it will be like a strong return audience. Like if an institution actually means something to the city it's in, then it won't need to pitch for its audience.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah. Maybe that's my utopia.
Oh my god. Marketing is
I love
obsolete.
that.
Wow.
Marketing is obsolete. I would love that.
I would love that so
yeah.
much.
Yeah, have communities instead of audiences.
Yeah. Yeah, and it also makes me think about how I think a lot of people might be a bit like, oh god, if like the process gets too like grassroots or whatever, like does that mean we're going to be sacrificing a whole heap of quality? Like how would we define like our quality anymore, and how would we like how would we do that?
To gatekeep anymore.
Oh,
Yeah,
what
oh
a
my god, we
shit
don't get to
name.
gatekeep quality anymore. But I think there would just be such a lovely I think there could be like this really critical intellectual practice that artists themselves start like working with, like critical like pedagogies and critical like practices in communities and critical lenses on power and how's that all working and the like work that we're doing. And I guess I just wanted to say that like doing that work has been some of the most like intellectual and rewarding and critical work I have ever done. Like I think I've done more intellectually stimulating work like outside of art school, learning to be a social worker in a way, because you're really like you're applying like your politics, your critical lens, all this like social justice stuff to yourself, like not even just to what you're producing, but like the way that I'm presenting and acting and interacting with people and the quality of my relationships with them, and then what we are creating together as well. It's like it's super, I mean it's amazing. It's being such amazing work.
Can you pitch your institutions as social workers for the art utopia?
Oh yeah, my little utopian idea is like, instead of curators having this role where it's like we're gatekeeping a finite program with like only 12 slots a year, where like we're here to decide thing, that curators act much more like social workers. So it's like you kind of approach a curator as a client and
they support you.
They support you. Yeah, exactly.
To do what you want to do.
Exactly. They're like, this sounds great. Here, let's have some intellectual conversation. Also, how's your like mental health? Also, here, let's like introduce you to some other community members while we're at it. Do some community development stuff. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that would be awesome. Yeah. And like, sorry you wouldn't get to have like the intellectual social capital anymore, but like, yeah, sorry you wouldn't have to have that anymore, but I just think you don't need it. Like it's fine.
How do we do this?
Yeah, like let the artists have it and you have it in collaboration. Instead of
How do we
community intellectual capital instead of like gate-kept institutional intellectual capital.
How do we do this?
Yeah.
I feel like the answer you always give to how do we do this is you have to test it on the ground in REs first.
Yeah.
But there is something about the leap of like REs not being taken seriously by funding bodies, and if they start doing weird and radical things, like it only works because they're so grassroots, and it could never work for like the rigor of programming that the institution requires. But there were really radical initiatives briefly where institutions of all sorts have flare-ups of like critically talking about this.
Totally.
They just don't follow through on like the research that is being done and the program and critique that they are platforming. but not adopting. And I wonder what the block is there. Like, I think it's literally just the rat race. Like,
I think it is. I think it's the turnover and
the lack of funding for organisational development and the focus of funding on programming. So like you can program an exhibition about institutional critique, but you can't get funding to execute the institutional critique.
Yeah.
So, well, you all know that I wrote a submission for an artist UBI for the National Cultural Policy, and I reckon we should all be like pushing hella hard towards that, because it would make this process so much easier.
Or even as an interim step, if UBI is too much for neoliberal funding bodies, like the satellite model of like if you just provide stable organisational funding to a whole bunch of satellite organisations that are connected to community, and then like artists are able to register with that RE and access their UBI that way, and then there's some sort of accountability for outputs for the whatever, that seems like a good midway.
Rolling funding would be amazing, and I don't think that's too big a leap or an ask. You know, like rolling funding for organisations instead of this 4-year cycle and this program specific funding or whatever. Like, that would be a great thing to advocate for. I mean, look, we have like a federal government who's like listening somewhat. You know,
they wrote a cultural policy.
And I think, like, you know, they're like talking right now about bringing in a wage. What's it called? Like the wage standards for artists and things like that, and making them like official government wage standards and award standards. That's the word I'm thinking of. Yeah, they want to bring in an award. They're doing some cool stuff. I also know that there's like a new body. It's called like the Arts and Entertainment Workplaces body, something like that. The Australia Council's putting it together, and from the sounds of it, it's kind of meant to be a bit like an advisory body for like if you're having issues in your workplace. So I'd be kind of interested to see what they do and if they have any power and if that changes things, because arts orgs need an HR. They don't currently have it.
We didn't mention that. It's
We didn't mention
kind of
that.
a big deal.
Yeah. No HR in the little S2Ms.
Yeah.
The small to mediums.
Kind of a big deal.
Yeah, so there's stuff happening. So I reckon like our advocacy, I think our advocacy could just be like a bit more radical in general in the industry. I don't know about what you two think.
I feel like a tiny change in terms of HR would just, you know, how you have a treasurer on the board, have somebody whose role it is to do HR on the board, and like they actually check in with their staff and know the rate of turnover and like know what people's capacity is and what KPIs are being expected of them. Like at the moment we're reliant on the director to pass that information through to the board, and that process can dilute it because the director wants to be perceived as doing a good job. So there is a mechanism to stop that transparency.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think the downside of an earlier podcast is that August is in his witching hour.
Aww. Well, I think we've done some amazing imagining work. Just then.
Did we get any comments?
Only spam.
Only spam.
Oh, come on.
Do you want to hear?
Yeah.
It's pretty crude.
Ooh.
Oh no! What do we get?
From a user named Log. First they put in like a weird. They put in like, I don't know how they did it. They're amazing. But the spam message was, boys use their hot dogs and girls let the boys use their donuts. Combine the hot dog and the donut together, and that makes the wine juices release.
Oh my
God! What is happening?
That's how the babies are baked.
Okay.
Was that on the screen the whole
Desert.
time?
Actually, the chat was broken on the screen the entire time.
God.
So only
Great.
people watching the live replay can see that. And I didn't realize that the chat was broken, so when
I'm
I pulled up
blushing.
the chat on mine, I was like, oh wait, I'll have to like quickly remove that.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, more attention economy problems.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And yeah, that's about it. But if you have any messages in the chat, if you're
Yeah,
watching,
please.
put
And
it
I
in.
guess,
Any
like,
thoughts or opinions?
yeah, and let us know what your experiences have been. We do, like, the critical reflection processes that I do with students, we can also do as an RE together. So it's really good, actually, if you're, like, working in an organization or a hierarchy with some, like, weird power dynamics. The critical reflection can help you out because it's literally made for, like, social workers who are going into, like, some of the most hostile environments in this country, like prisons and hospitals and, you know, very neoliberal organizations. So yeah, if you're feeling stuck and feel like that would be useful,
Any situations where you've felt like you've lacked power,
if you're feeling powerless,
it helps you identify your power.
mm-hmm.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it's really good if you're feeling really stuck as well. It's really good for keeping you or getting you unstuck by identifying some of that, like, black and white thinking and, like, you know, assumptions that you're making, and it just, like, loosens everything up. It's really nice. Yeah, we say in class, like, we're ventilating it. We're ventilating your problems. So, you know, like, reach out to us if that sounds useful anytime.
Clara, did you have any final thoughts?
The only final thought that I've been holding on to was just about like the lots of little community REs being run, and how would we talked about, like, gatekeeping and how would, like, maintain the rigor, etc., etc. But I think, like, we in academia, like, we acknowledge, like, things being peer reviewed as being, like, credible, and I think, like, when things happen in communities in really nice ways, like, we're accountable to each other and to our relationships, and I think things being, like, they would be really peer reviewed in that way, and that would, like, hold it up a little bit, I think.
Yeah, that would be fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so much more meaningful and nourishing.
Yes.
Yeah, for everyone
Instead
involved.
of extractive.
Yeah.
Nourishing.
Yeah.
Start
Yeah.
now.
Anyway, that's the only
Imagine
thought-
what
that's the only thought that I had about
looks
that.
like for all of you arts workers who are watching.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're an arts worker, you already know how to run an org by working in an org.
Yeah.
So, start an RE. do what you actually want to do in your free
Start
time.
an RE.
If
I
you need
feel
help
like the sound bites of Beaver is like UBI start an RE.
Yeah. every talk that happens. What are the takeaways?
Yeah.
Hey.
That was great.
Yeah. Thank you so much to Lara.
No worries.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so much.
Yeah, really nice to have a conversation about this.
Ah.
Yeah.
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 It was great.
Very good, very nourishing conversation.
Yeah.
It's good to feel normal.
Yeah.
It's good to feel like other people
Seen,
get what's going on.
understood.
Yeah.
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 Definitely.
Thank you heaps.
I value all of your work.
Oh, we value your work too. All your labour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with that,
All right, and
August
with that,
says it's
August's
over.
losing his mind now. Let's go.
Attacking me.
Are you alright?
Yeah. Is that finished?
Yeah. Finished.
Sorry. Tech stuff happening.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.